For 77 years, the railways battled to get trains over the mountain from the city of Pietermaritzburg to the valley beyond. This was finally solved with the building of twin tunnels 4.5 miles long. I'm John Davies from South Africa, and I am busy building an N-gauge layout depicting the 4 different routes that was used over the years. I will now take you to a map showing the 4 routes and giving an idea of what had to be built into the layout. Of course, building the layout in a second bedroom, it would not be possible to build in HO gauge, as this would require 4 times the space. But now we go over to the maps. In 1881, the railway line from the port of Durban had reached Pietermaritzburg. It had crossed the Umdunzuzi River and reached Maritzburg Station. Now, in order to proceed further, the line had to be built over this mountain here to reach the valley beyond. This mountainside was very steep, with several spurs sticking out, and the route was sought to go over the mountain. As all the earthworks for this railway line had to be dug by hand, the contours were followed, going up the valley alongside of the spur and climbing the side of the spur up to a neck, where it crossed the neck to the face of the mountain. Again, following a very zigzag route, following the contour. The line eventually reached the flat-topped mountain and proceeded to the settlement of Hilton, where a station was made. It continued over the mountain down into the valley below to Sedora, which was just a small settlement. This line being built to a 3-foot 6 gauge, which was necessary for the very hilly country where sharp bends were needed. Bends with a radius of 300 foot and gradients of 3 to 4%. This did fine in the beginning, as it just had to compete with ox wagons and horse-drawn carts. But very soon, the line was inadequate with its steep gradients and the small locomotives that couldn't carry very heavy trains. In the beginning, trains were limited to about 60 tons, which was all that the small locomotives of the day could handle. In 1916, a new route was opened, a route which went up the valley between the 2 spurs, climbing to a point where there was a ridge. This was a much gentler line, gradients of only 2% and curves of 500-foot radius. At this ridge, they were started building a tunnel which soon collapsed. This was eventually turned into a cutting some 30 meters or 100 foot deep. On the other side of this ridge, the line followed the contour of the valley through a horseshoe here. And from there, a section of line was built up the side to join the original line that was opened in 1883. This section of the original line now had no further use. It was very tortuous, so the line was lifted. The new line went up to the head of the valley through another horseshoe curve with a lot of earthworks and carried up until it reached the head of this valley. It then turned round and followed this spur. There was quite a pronounced point on the spur, and a small tunnel was built through. Again it continued following the contour, again with gentle curves, gentle gradients, all the way up to a point near Hilton where it hit against a steep hillside. At this point a tunnel was built which went underneath Hilton Station and continued on a downhill to Sedora. This section of the line was a double track, and this new section was a single track. The old 1883 line was kept open, which allowed trains travelling towards Maritzburg on the downhill to follow there, and the trains climbing up over the mountain followed the more gentle route. And this served pretty well in handling the traffic. But there was just one problem. This spur and steep hillsides was very unstable and was prone to landslides. And this continued to be a problem until a better route was sought. Breaking news. Today at 12 noon, the first train hauled by electric locomotives will leave Pietermaritzburg, heading uptown hill. The power is supplied from the recently completed Colenso power station, which was built to supply the railway. This will allow trains of twice the weight to travel up the hill at double the speed. In 1960, from the head of this valley, twin tunnels were built through the mountain at a 2% climbing gradient, which came out at Sedora Station. And this is the line that continues until today, with its 2% gradients, 500-foot radius curves, and the double line all the way from Maritzburg past Sedora going inland. With the tunnels opened, this route around Town Hill with the unstable ground was no longer needed, and the line was lifted. This connection to the 1883 route and the 1883 route was kept open, as it served a lot of villages along this route and provided an alternative if there was problems in the tunnels. So this line continued with limited passenger suburban services and goods services. It also provided a route for any steam locomotives travelling through the area, as the tunnels were not suitable to carry steam locomotives. By 1984, the demand for traffic along this 1883 line had fallen away. passengers had moved to road transport, and there was very little goods activity on the line. So this line was closed down from there all the way to Hilton, and the rails were lifted. However, from Hilton through to Sadara, the line was left, although it was out of action. Hilton Station has been declared a historical site and today is a museum with items of interest of the local area and a few old steam locomotives. This section of railway line with its 4 different routes being the subject of a N-scale model railway layout. The question was, how do we fit a close to straight line going from there to there into a square layout? Well, looking at the mountainside with the valley here, the answer was to make a hole in the middle of the layout and to bend this area around that hole to finish close to Maritzburg. This end point here would be much higher than down there. So a hidden spiral would be made to carry the line so that trains travelling from Maritzburg up to Sadara would come down the spiral, entering Maritzburg as if they'd come from the coast, and again travelling inland. Likewise, trains travelling down the mountain would recirculate in the opposite direction, which was made possible by the double line. The layout holds all the previous lines and allows different trains to follow different routes The layout started in February 2019. A spare bedroom was acquired, and the first thing to do was to take measurements and work out the maximum layout size that would fit in the room. Well, the room was measured and a drawing of the room was made. Plotting onto that drawing the maximum size layout that the room could accommodate. As one will see, there is a walking space around 3 sides of the layout, but what about the 4th side? Well, the layout would be mounted on wheels. As I said, the layout had to be movable in the description. Well, at that stage, the boundaries of the modules and the hole in the center, which is the green circle, was not determined. That would come back at a later stage, once the track plan was worked out. The 1883 line is shown here in green, working its way around the perimeter, climbing up a steep gradient of about 4%, up onto the plateau on top of the hill, going through Hilton Station here, and then down into the valley below where Sadara Station was. From there it just moves on and goes into the spiral, which will bring it back to Pietermaritzburg. The 1916 line went up this valley here, going around the hole in the middle, round the first horseshoe, over a neck of this spur here, and joining the 1883 line. This line was continued through a second horseshoe up the valley to the head, from where it proceeded to follow the contour around Town Hill, joining the 1883 line just beyond Hilton Station. This line was also doubled up to this point, allowing trains in both directions, here in one direction, there in the other direction, round Town Hill. "1960 brought the tunnels at the top of this valley. The tunnel actually travels underneath the 1883 line across the layout and comes out over there, joining there again. And that's how we worked out the basic layout. As mentioned in the description, the track had to be transportable, which meant it had to be built in modules. Now you will see these modules have an irregular shape. This was done in order so that track crossing from one module to another crossed at a 90-degree angle to the joint, hence that dog leg there, and hence this bit sticking out here. It was divided into 6 modules, each of a size that could fit into a packing case. Packing cases which would double as the stand for the layout. And this is how we supported the layout. 2 packing cases, each on each side of the hole in the middle, with a lattice strips of wood screwed to it, forming a framework to which the modules were connected by flat plates and screws. Screws were used throughout so that the whole thing could be easily dismantled, freeing the packing cases to accommodate the modules. And this brings us to the end of this chapter. In the next episode, we will bring you photos and narrative showing how the packing cases were built, showing how the module bases were built, and also how it all fits together to form a stable base for a layout. It is expected that when the 3rd episode comes out, that it will include video. I hope you liked this episode, and even if you didn't, please remember, please like and subscribe, because in the next episode there might be something that's of interest to you. And with this, I'll say goodbye for now.